As you study the available books and teachings of the doctors who give advice and counsel to diabetics, you find a tremendous disparity among them. Two very different doctors who've written books to help people find a cure for diabetes are Dr. Joel Fuhrman and Dr. Richard Bernstein. Fuhrman is a vegan and Bernstein is a basic low-carber. What's going on here? Can they both really be helping people, or is one of them just lying? In this video, I'm going to take an in-depth look at Fuhrman's popular book, The End of Diabetes, and see how he stacks up against Richard Bernstein. Do they have anything at all in common? When you consider just how different the plant-based, whole-food, low-fat diet is from the low-carb, high-fat, enjoy-your-steaks diet, and the fact that both approaches claim numerous testimonies of people who've been helped by them, and they claim victory over diabetes through them, it's enough to make you scratch your head in amazement. But when you take a closer look, you find certain aspects which both plans share, and which may make them more alike than they seem. A good example of this is found in the book The End of Diabetes by Dr. Joel Fuhrman. Fuhrman's approach is essentially a modified vegan plan. He sharply criticizes meat and eggs and pushes a mostly plant-based diet, although he does allow for small, occasional portions of lean meat. He mocks the Atkins diet and criticizes any serious and deliberate restriction of dietary carbohydrates. This places him at nearly the opposite end of the spectrum in comparing him with, say, Dr. Richard Bernstein, who's my mentor, and whose stress on limiting carbs has been such a revelation to me. And yet, like Dr. Bernstein, Fuhrman can produce large numbers of people who've been helped by his dietary and lifestyle plan. What gives here? Is he just plain lying? I don't think so. When you carefully read his book and study the diet he recommends, you discover he and Bernstein have a lot more in common than at first glance. Let's consider some of their common emphases which may explain how two such widely divergent approaches to diabetes reversal can both prove effective. First, both stress the importance of getting to the appropriate weight for one's height. Now, this simple but powerful thought by itself could result in the cure of a huge percentage of diabetics and near-diabetics. No, not every obese person is diabetic, and certainly there are some slim diabetics around. But carrying too many pounds increases your odds of diabetes regardless of what you've been eating or not eating. Likewise, no matter which dietary plan you adopt, if you start losing weight and change from obese to normal, you may well end up one of those testimonies listed in the book of the doctor or nutritionist that you follow. Another common feature of both Fuhrman and Bernstein is that both view sugar as the ultimate enemy of diabetics. Cutting out all candy, sweets, and sugary drinks is a must for anyone who's serious about getting control of their blood sugar, in both men's eyes. And by the way, this is true for virtually any and every reasonable diet plan you can find anywhere. You show me a dietary plan which suggests that sugar is fine. They're hard to find. You might hear this from the sugar industry, but that's about it. And oh yeah, the ADA, American Diabetes Association, strangely defends sugar, declaring, quote, if eaten as part of a healthy meal plan or combined with exercise, sweets and desserts can be eaten by people with diabetes. There are no more off-limits to people with diabetes than there are to people without diabetes. Fuhrman responds with these words, this advice is flat out wrong, as diabetics are given inadequate dietary advice, placed on medications that cause weight gain and push the failing pancreas to work harder, and generally guided to mismanage their diabetes. The result will, of course, be more medication and the eventual need for insulin. This is simply drug-promoting double talk. Dr. Bernstein could not have said it any better. And as with weight reduction, any diabetes reversal plan that can get you to give up on sugar, sugary foods, sodas, fruit juices, sweet pastries, and the like can go a long, long way in significantly lowering your blood sugar levels, regardless of whether they forbid meat or encourage meat. Another feature that both these doctors have in common is that they both warn about eating starches. Now, Bernstein views all starches as high-carb, quick-dissolving, and blood sugar spiking, which is exactly what they are. Fuhrman is not so quick to condemn all starches, but he does push people to lay off white bread, white potatoes, and white rice. He writes, "There are many vegan foods and vegan diets that would be unfavorable for diabetics, especially those that include lots of finely ground grains and foods made from white flour and white potatoes." Now, that sounds a little bit like Bernstein, although Bernstein would say that white or brown, sweet or russet, all breads, potatoes, and rice have with them the ability to significantly raise blood sugar. But Fuhrman takes this a little farther later in the book with an even stronger statement about starches. He writes, "Typical vegan diets do not show the dramatic improvements in lipids, triglycerides, glucose, and even weight loss. One important design feature for better health and disease reversal is the reduction of high-starch vegetables and grains and the substitution of beans, nuts, and seeds instead. A high-starch, low-fat diet, regardless of whether or not the dieter is eating meat, can derail weight loss and lead to high triglycerides." Right on, Dr. Fuhrman. And also, to his credit, Dr. Fuhrman recognizes the dangers of constantly high insulin levels. He writes, "Studies have shown that high levels of insulin in the blood promote the hardening of the arteries, even among non-diabetics. In diabetics, the effects of excess insulin are even worse. Quite a few studies illustrate the dangers of giving insulin to type 2 diabetics. When these patients are given insulin, compared with those given an oral anti-diabetes medication, the risk of death from heart attacks tripled." What Fuhrman does not say is that the number one cause of high insulin in the blood is high carbohydrates in the diet. Carbs drive insulin. Insulin drives metabolic disease and death. And the implication of this is, cut the carbs, you cut the insulin. Cut the insulin, you get better instead of worse. Fuhrman won't quite admit that, but by his insistence on cutting out sugar, white flour, white rice, and limiting high-starch foods, he's essentially practicing that philosophy. There's a huge difference and improvement of his beans, nuts, and green vegetables diet over the standard American diet of high sugars and high refined carbs. Guess what? It turns out that Joel Fuhrman, with his mostly vegan diet and his instinctive dislike for meat and eggs, isn't really so far from Richard Bernstein and other low-carbers whose basic concept for curing diabetes is to drastically reduce carbs, replacing them with protein and fat and lots of low-carb vegetables. When I first read some of Fuhrman's book, I thought, how can this guy be getting results? With his nearly vegan diet and the way he blasts low-carb diets, he's saying the exact opposite of Dr. Bernstein. But when I examined his diet a little closer, I realized he and Bernstein weren't nearly so far apart as I thought. And yes, I can see why he's getting results with many people, even though he refuses to put himself in the category of a low-carb dietitian by stressing the removal of sugar from our diets and telling diabetics to beware of starchy foods and focus on beans, nuts, seeds, and green leafy vegetables. The natural result would be that anyone who went from a normal, standard American diet to his diet would certainly end up with far fewer carbs in their meals and should see significantly lower blood glucose levels. Fuhrman declares in his book, bagels, white bread, pasta, pizza, and rolls are all staples of the American diet, and they are a large contributor to our epidemic of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. Well, Bernstein and all the other low-carbers, including me, would have no argument whatsoever with that. In fact, we'd give him a hearty amen. Fuhrman would never call himself a low-carb dietitian, but the truth is his diet is a low-carb diet, at least when you compare it to the way most people eat these days. Sadly, many vegan nutritionists and proponents are not nearly as savvy as Fuhrman. In their minds, anything that comes from the ground is fine, and some even go so far as to suggest that the solution for insulin resistance is more and more carbs. They see diabetes as a problem that can be fixed if we just keep on ingesting carbs until finally our body throws up the white flag and says, if you can't beat 'em, join 'em. The ADA recommends 45 to 60 grams of carbs per meal, which is absolutely criminal and insane in the minds of doctors like Richard Bernstein. What most of these people somehow miss is that what makes a diabetic is an inability to process carbs and sugars the way normal people do. In many cases, we got that way by stuffing our bodies with carbs and flooding our bloodstreams with insulin. And if we suppose that by doing more of the same, and more and more and more, we'll somehow magically cure ourselves of diabetes, we are living in a fantasy world. Well, it turns out that at least some vegans and low-carbers have more in common than they realize. Dr. Fuhrman wisely recognizes that starches can be a problem for diabetics, and that beans and nuts are much healthier and less likely to produce blood sugar spikes than bread, sugar, and starches. I can't argue with that. I agree completely. It doesn't surprise me that he can produce case after case of individuals he's helped. But in my opinion, the benefit of his diet has nothing to do with cutting out meat, eggs, or cheese from the diet. It has everything to do with slashing bread, sugar, and potatoes. If Dr. Fuhrman and a vegan diet have helped you, I thank God for it. Those of us who struggle with blood sugar issues need to stick together and support each other. One thing I will say is a slight knock on Dr. Fuhrman, at least what I learned of him from this book, is that he gives almost no emphasis at all on testing ourselves with blood sugar monitors in attempting to discover what various foods and meals are doing to our blood sugar. I think this omission is not a good thing. He seems to be of the opinion that we're to simply follow his diet and go to our doctors and they'll confirm that we're getting better. Well, I believe in doctors for sure, but diabetics are not stupid, dumb animals who cannot think for themselves and cannot test themselves. I found victory over runaway blood sugar from looking at a little $20 blood sugar monitor again and again, as it told me 1 hour after eating whether that meal was helpful or dreadful, safe or dangerous. And once I started doing this regularly, it did not take long for me to figure out what I should be eating and what I should be avoiding. The number one rule for overcoming runaway blood sugar is this: you do whatever you have to do to get those numbers lower. But if it weren't for my blood sugar monitor, I wouldn't have a clue what I should do. I would be in darkness, going around reading books, watching YouTube videos, and scratching my head wondering who was right and which diet would work for me. But armed with that little blood sugar monitor, I had a powerful weapon I could use to quickly see the direction I needed to go. Yeah, I do read books, I watch videos, but I will never ignore my little buddy who's been such a help to me. Thanks, little fella. I'm not a vegan, but if I was going to go that way, I'd follow Dr. Fuhrman's plan. Now, there are some fanatical vegan doctors and nutritionists out there that simply believe as long as you avoid meat and dairy products, just eat anything you like and as much as you like. Those are the kind of writers and teachers you want to avoid. If you appreciated this video, give it a thumbs up. That way YouTube will rank it higher in their search engine and more people will be able to see it. And consider subscribing to our channel and then clicking the little bell icon so that you'll be notified every time we post a new video. Well, that's it for now. God bless, and see you again soon.